He is the founder of Task Force Butler Institute, among other things. Chris, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks. It's good to be back.
All right, so here we are. It is now, let's see, Tuesday, October 7th, and there is a lot going on, but I wanted to talk to you specifically about veterans today, and a couple of things. One is, the idea of radicalization, which you have an incredible personal story about, but also what I see as an ongoing, what I feel is a scandal of epic proportions in which we ask the fewest of us to do and give the most, and we treat them the worst when they get home. And the reason why I want to talk to you about this is a pair of stories that came and went very quickly. And let me preface this by saying that uh, you know, correlation and causation are two different things. But 2 weekends ago, we saw in Michigan a veteran, go into a Mormon church, start shooting, and then burn the damn thing down. And then that same day, down in North Carolina, we saw a veteran from a boat, of all things, start shooting into a restaurant and killed several people. And again, I don't want to necessarily correlate that they were veterans other than the fact that they were, but give us a sense of when you get home from active combat, multiple tours, what that reentry process is like into society, because I can't imagine that it's easy.
Yeah, that reintegration into society is really different for everyone who deploys. It is based on your unit, your age, your rank, your family, whether or not you have a family, where you're deployed to, where you're coming home to. There are just so many aspects of your life that impact the transition into coming back home. Now, my experience was I was 20 years old. Um, I was a forward observer in the Army. I had deployed for 11 months, mostly in Sadr City, Baghdad. I came home for 2 weeks for mid-tour leave, went back for a week, and then went home for good because they had to check off a box saying that I went on leave. Um, and in doing that, my unit thought they were doing me a favor by sending me home a few days ahead of the rest of my unit. But that meant that I went from combat to home to living in an empty barracks by myself. And that was an incredibly isolating experience. And at the age of 20 years old, I didn't have the lexicon to describe what I now understand as symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, in my case, that led to a ton of very heavy drinking, which was normal in my infantry unit. It's kind of like a badge of honor being able to drink a handle of liquor in a weekend. Um, so, having that skewed sense of what is acceptable because of your environment, all of these things can make a transition not go well. I don't know what the deployment histories of these two veterans are. I don't know whether they had PTSD. Um, Veterans are slightly less likely than the average American to adopt conspiracy theories and other radicalizing content. So there is that in our favor, kind of goes against the stereotype. But part of the reason that extremist organizations seek to recruit veterans is because we are effective at whatever we do, and that could be working for a Fortune 500 company, which is why Bank of America has like their own veterans group that they put on a pedestal in Wall Street. I say that as a Columbia alum who had these recruiting events pushed on me all the time at the University of New York City. Um, and we can be just as effective if we are radicalized into something much more harmful.
And so your experience with PTSD, as you've told me before, and I think you've shared with your audience before, is that you got home, another group of veterans saw the signs.
Mm-hmm.
And so just remind us of that experience that you had.
Yeah. So my transition home took a long time. I got out of the Army in a bad kind of way, with a less than honorable discharge after surviving a suicide attempt. I went from kind of my unit's golden boy, put on a pedestal and really hiding my symptoms, to a suicide attempt, which the Army interpreted as misconduct. And I went overnight, I was suddenly treated like a criminal. So that was another, incredibly isolating event, and I lost access to the veterans community because, with a less than honorable discharge, at the time, organizations like VFW would not accept me as a member. So I literally like couldn't go to the posts where veterans at that time, mostly older veterans, were hanging out. So I spent about 5 years kind of in a rough and dark place. A lot of self medication, um, a lot of proactive therapy. I did still work, did still qualify for VA healthcare, and without that, um, I don't. I am certain that I would not be alive today. Uh, but it wasn't until I, more than 5 years after coming home, got into school and started at community college, where I was kind of fulfilling a lot of negative stereotypes, like putting the hood over my head, having the headphones on, like shades, like don't talk to me, don't come near me. And a bunch of veterans, other combat guys, literally pulled me off the couch and kind of welcomed me um, into their group of friends, and forced me out of this shell that I had been living in for half a decade.
Well, and so you mentioned that your own suicide attempt, which I appreciate you even sharing that experience. But I was looking at this yesterday, that the suicide rate among veterans is twice that of non-military serving Americans.
Hmm.
One, as I understand it, and I'll give you the opportunity to respond to this, is that those who are served by the VA tend to appreciate the care, and I get the sense that those who serve at the VA take their jobs very seriously.
Hmm.
So why is there that massive delta? If the service is it like you, which is, yes, you had the services, but even with that, it was a sense of being ostracized and being isolated. Why is it that the military, and do they still do this today, that if you have a recorded attempt of suicide, that you're suddenly put out, in this place where it's like, don't look at them? Is it a sense of denial on the part of the military? Just walk us through a little bit of the process.
Yeah, so the military doesn't have a lot of incentives to ensure that veterans are in good shape on their way out. The military and the like retention requirements, or the quotas for retention or reenlistments that are put on commanders, um, they're that's the only incentives that they have to follow, is keep you in the military. Once you've decided to leave, culturally, and in a lot of places, and it certainly was in mine, like, you are viewed as a traitor,
Hmm.
for not like giving your entire life to the military, which is stupid. And you have people who've never been in the civilian world, who are in charge of you and might be 20 years older than you and much more senior rank, telling you you are going to fail in the real world. You won't make it. Meanwhile, they've never had a day in the real world, since they were 17 years old, and have no idea what it is to find a job. So, um, the VA is, though it has the name, the VA is Department of Veterans Affairs. It is a cabinet level agency. Um, it suffers from a reputation from uh, from folks who have bad experiences that are legitimate. And because our culture cares so much about veterans generally, those are the stories that really get amplified. They are true. I'm not denying that people have problems at the VA. And the VA was not great when I came home in 2007, and it was still filled with Korean War vets, World War II vets, and Vietnam vets. Um, and in order for me to get care, that meant one of the older guys like had to wait longer for an appointment. Like 2007, the VA was in rough shape. But today, the VA is the largest and most successful integrated healthcare system in the United States. For disabled veterans like myself, we have a lifetime of healthcare. I, living in New York, have can drive to a ton of VA hospitals that have everything that I could possibly need. But there are people in rural areas who just simply do not have the same experience because they might live 4 or 6 hours away from a VA hospital. So, you know, I think one of the people who comes to mind when I think about the VA's reputation is Pete Hegseth. He his rise to fame was running an organization called Concerned Veterans for America, which was originally Veterans for Freedom, which is a rabidly pro-Iraq war organization that he's scrubbed from his history. But Concerned Veterans for America was funded by the Kochs to reduce billionaires' tax burdens. And Concerned Veterans for America has been running campaigns for as long as the organization existed to amplify those horror stories at the VA so that they
Mm.
can shift money from this what is socialized medicine to the private sector, where billionaires can
Where they can
get
get
that
screwed like
taxpayer dollar
everybody
back.
else.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't mean to make light of it. I don't mean to make light of it. But it's interesting you bring that up. I had a friend years ago who was running a local ballot measure, I think in Nashville or someplace like that, Chris.
Hmm.
And I bring it up because you mentioned the Kochs, to increase funding for public transportation. And the Kochs were the people who put the vast majority of the money into the No campaign. Not only because they don't like anything that the government does, but of course, certainly because Koch Industries is such a massive player in the oil and gas industry. Anything that's going to reduce the need for an individual automobile, especially an internal combustion one, to have to go from point A to point B is something they don't like. So yes, their tentacles are broad. Also, fascinating to me that the Kochs, who have been, I think one of them ran for vice president on the Libertarian ticket in 1980. I'm not sure David or which one it was, but even their father, right, who would be probably like Methuselah now, right? He'd probably be 200
Hmm.
years old. Was really into this stuff, and so I think that a lot of these things are not new phenomena, right? These sorts of organizations and these sorts of donors and benefactors to these, it's all really just self-serving at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? It has no, they can call it whatever they want. Concerned Veterans for America. It's all just, it's all double speak. It's all just, oh yeah,
Hmm.
we really care about this, but don't look behind the curtain, right?
Yeah.
The Wizard of Oz is back there just trying to screw the average veteran, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's what we've got coming out of this administration. Yesterday, a Washington Post investigation into supposed fraudulent disability benefits claims for veterans came out, and it was at the top of WashingtonPost.com for most of yesterday, and that story ran without comment from the secretary or from the VA's press office. And that was deliberate. The Department of Veterans Affairs, the political appointees at the Department of Veterans Affairs, are there to dismantle it. Like that is what they're there for. They are there to, and they are advocating actively to take money away from VA hospitals and the patients like myself who get all of our healthcare there and move it into the private sector. They call this choice, but it's not a choice if the VA doesn't have doctors anymore, right? Because that's what happens when you pull the budget away. So, uh, so rather than push back on this Washington Post story, which was written by journalists that I have a lot of respect for and have worked with in the past, it was just a one-way narrative where they were basically filling in the blanks. And anyone who reads Washington Post story from yesterday would come away with the idea that there are tons of veterans who are fraudulently filing disability claims. Uh, which is not the case. All of the examples that they listed in the Washington Post story were prosecutions. It was examples of the system working. People who committed fraud were caught getting prosecuted. The money was getting recouped and they were getting sent to jail. But because the secretary refused to sit for an interview, and the former Fox News reporter who's now running comms at the Department of Veterans Affairs wanted to wait until after publication to issue a statement, where instead of addressing the claims that basically paint veterans as a bunch of con artists, he just attacked the Washington Post and said, "Oh, the liberal Washington Post. Of course, they're trying to damage veterans." So through their silence, they allowed millions of Americans to get the impression that veterans like myself are a bunch of fraudsters. I
Right.
mean, it's disgusting, and it's so deliberate.
Well, and we should remember too that what we're seeing now, personnel and policy wise and budget wise, Chris, is really a continuation from the first Trump administration, where Trump desperately wanted to get rid of the VA,
Mhm.
but back then was told, the political implications of doing so would be so negative that he couldn't get it done. But that was something that he did. Obviously, in the intervening 4 years, they very much understood how to make those things happen with obviously a complicit Congress and a compliant judiciary. On that note, I want to ask. You mentioned Hegseth as someone who was a rifleman. Who a forward observer, as you noted.
Mhm.
What do you think the force thought of his remarks last week? Do you think they thought he was a clown? I have to assume that there's a fair bit of cynicism and skepticism in the average line unit of mostly guys who are on the leading edge of these things. What do you think they thought?
So I know that in the room, the generals, because these are educated people who have probably multiple degrees. They are in their 40s at youngest.
Right.
These are learned people. They were absolutely not impressed with Pete Hegseth. I can say that very confidently. But I think about the typical person who's signing their name on the dotted line right now, who's 18 years old. They were 7 or 8 when Trump came onto the national like political scene.
Right.
So all of this stuff that to us is absurd is their version of normal.
It's a really good
So
point. Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of folks, particularly educated, officers who are very disturbed, and certainly people of color who have lived experience and understand, and women in the military who have lived experience and know what Hegseth is advocating for: open racism, literal violence. Like, he's trying to bring back drill instructors beating the hell out of recruits, which is there's nothing good about that,
Right.
and undermining the process of reporting for things like sexual assault and sexual misconduct. Like, Hegseth is trying to turn the military into a parody of itself, and people who want to join that today, like the young people who are joining ICE, are not good people, and they've been shaped that way because Donald Trump and all of those enablers around him have normalized this shit over the last decade.
No, I mean, I think I think it's a good point. We forget about this. I mean, I came up living in Washington, D.C., Chris, during the Reagan era, right?
Hmm.
So Reagan, and I assume for many young people, Gen Xers in particular, right? Reagan sort of imprinted on us. It was the Cold War. We were the good guys. The Russians were the bad guys. And so we should not have any illusions about the fact that if you were 10 years old, right, when Donald Trump came down the escalator, right, your frame of reference for American politics basically starts with him.
Hmm.
Maybe even if you're a little older, say you're 15, you're a freshman or sophomore in high school, right? Like, this becomes your reality, and then I don't want to say you become inured to it, but it doesn't become unusual, right? It's not like you don't know enough, you haven't lived long enough to say, wait, 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 wait.
Yep.
And then even people who are a little bit older, maybe a little bit younger than you and me, right? They've never known anything other than crisis,
Hmm.
whether or not it's 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, the financial meltdown, and then you get Trump, right? So, like, for them, it's been one just pond of black swans for most of their lives.
Hmm. Yeah, it's the millennial. I'm 40 years old. I was born in '85. So the towers fell when I was 16. I The Iraq War kicked off when I was 18, which I went into the following year. Hurricane Katrina happened while I was in Iraq, and I was with the Louisiana National Guard, like helping them go home, replacing them. They were going home to no homes. Uh,
Right.
I got out of the military around the same time that everyone who went from high school in 2003 to college, they graduated and then the economy collapsed, right? like like us trying to get started, people of my age have had a lot of those fucking black swans. Uh, and now, today's younger folks, they had the isolation of COVID,
Right.
um, that shapes their lives. And that is, I think, a big part of what we're seeing in these like mass shootings, these meme shooters. They were all trapped inside, for a long time. They were not developing social skills, and they were going into environments uh, where toxic masculinity, the type that Pete Hegseth is trying to make a core tenet of the military, is the baseline, and it only gets worse from there.
What is so?
Personality that I was. And a big part of that, I wanted to serve my entire life, but after 9/11, I wanted to go kill terrorists. So, that was the enemy. It was as much about revenge as it was serving my country. As a New Yorker, it felt like everyone was touched by that violence on 9/11. So, putting myself back into the mindset of what I was when I was an 18-year-old recruit and just getting to my unit, um, I think about the messaging that would have resonated with me back then, like uh, Hegseth going up and talking about beards, unshaven faces being a big deal, which now I recognize is racist policy because it affects mostly and almost entirely black men.
Right.
Um, Back then, I would have thought him talking about people being overweight in the military is a problem. I would have been like, yeah, get the fatties out. That is who I was. I would have at that time, I one of my best friends, that I grew up with gay, and I was just coming to terms with getting rid of the homophobia, but I was nowhere near being accepting of trans people. That's who I was when I was 18. So if I were that 18-year-old, today and listening to Hegseth, I would have been excited by a lot of what he said, which is, um, it feels shameful to admit that, but that is the truth. And I think that there are probably hundreds of thousands of young men, currently in the military who heard Hegseth's message and were attracted to it.
All right, so let's extend that out now to something else, which is we'd heard a lot about during the campaign, during the Brennan Center events, the kind of thing that you did and I did. There was this assumption that the Insurrection Act would be potentially at the top of the list of the Trump administration's early actions. He mused about it again in an interview yesterday. So take us now from those people, those young men, mostly young men, who've now been inducted into the military. If they see this, if they get the word, okay, you're going to go to Portland, you're going to go to Chicago, you're going to go to Memphis. What do you think they think of that? Is it just like, okay, well, the president said it, and he's our guy, and this is an order, and he's allowed to do this, so we're going to go do it? Because history teaches us that armies do not make good police forces.
Mhm. Yeah, anybody who went to Iraq could tell you that the United States Army is not capable of operating as a competent police force. I say that as someone who was given that mission, with you know with no real training. Um, I think that we should expect from today's military the same type of attitudes that we are seeing that we saw from the National Guard in Los Angeles, which was and DC, which was demoralization, confusion about why they're being deployed, frustration with them having to put their life aside to go pick up trash. But there is a generation of young men who Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA groomed into loving people like what the fuck is his name? Uh, the kid who shot people in Wisconsin.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Brainport.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I know
Yeah,
you're talking about. Yeah.
There are young men in this country who have grown up thinking that Kyle
Rittenhouse
is a hero, and they may have joined the military thinking that Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero. Well, now I'm coming into the streets of wherever these people are rioting, and I've got the justification of the uniform that I'm wearing, and with that comes, potentially more violence. Now, people should recognize what is happening here. The National Guards from each of these blue states, who judges are saying, like in Washington, no, you can't mobilize them, President Trump, without the governor asking you to. They're trying to take troops from red states and put them into blue states. And the assumption that is being made by people like Governor Greg Abbott is that their troops are going to be much more disorderly than the National Guard, who are from that state, who are policing their neighbors. I would remind you that Greg Abbott pardoned someone who was on active duty, who drove his car into a Black Lives Matter protest, started shooting, killed an Air Force veteran, was convicted by a jury of his peers. And during that trial, it came out that he was a predator against children. The man was a pedophile. And even after all of that, Greg Abbott pardoned him because he wanted to reward him for killing someone at a Black Lives Matter protest. So people need to really internalize that. That is what Trump and Abbott are trying to do to the state of Washington right now.
Well, I mean, let me just say this, and then I want to talk about something a little bit, if not more
Less dark,
less dark, which is like we've seen all this before, and you mentioned this the during 2020 and the Black Lives Matter protests. Like we've seen these sorts of things. I think for me anyway, going back 5+ years now, it was the moment in which Trump tweeted, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts."
Mm-hmm.
That to me gave license to local, state, federal law enforcement and/or DHS officers, whoever they were, to start pepper spraying people in the face or shooting people with pepper balls. Or in Portland, right when the Proud Boys and whatever Antifa went after each other, and the cops stood aside, and then when the melee was over, they went and arrested the left of center, the lefty people, right? So we've seen this before. This isn't new. Our memories are short. But now we're in a much different space where, Trump is not theoretically running for re-election. Even if he is, it's not going to be like we'll be so far off the map. But we now have an entire edifice and infrastructure around him with the likes of Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and a Hegseth, right? Pam Bondi, who these people are, I don't call Miller incompetent, but the rest of them are incompetent on purpose, right? They weren't put there for their brains. They were put there for their complicity and their compliance. And that's really what worries me is that as you know, too, having been in combat, it only takes one small thing going the wrong way for a whole bunch of other things to unfold so fast that you really can't get the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that evidence supports my theory that the Trump administration is trying to provoke a shootout between protesters and the National Guard. In DC, Jeanine Pirro, who the Fox News, wino, like drunk host,
right,
is now the district attorney for Washington, D.C. And she said that she's no longer going to prosecute people for carrying long guns. There is no other thing that makes sense to me other than trying to get people to carry long guns while the National Guard is deployed to the district. I don't think you need both of those things, and I don't think that Janine Pirro thinks that you need both of these things. I think what they are trying to do is manufacture, um, a death bloom. That's what we used to call in the military, where one person pulls the trigger and all of a sudden a firefight starts. Nobody knows where the fucking bullets are coming from, and a lot of people get hurt. And
Right.
when there is video of this happening, and anybody in a uniform is hit, it doesn't matter what the facts are going to be. The facts don't matter. We live in a post-truth society. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, and all the rest of those fascists are going to play those images on loop to get the Fox News audience and everyone right of that into an absolute fervor. And
Well,
only
right,
bad things happen from there.
and don't forget, and so there's the firing up the faithful, but then there's also scaring the hell out of the normies, right? Which
Yeah,
is stay in your house, don't go on social media, right? Don't do anything.
yeah.
That, and I think that a lot of this, I think, is unfortunately, as history would teach us, is preparation for that. Okay, wow, okay, I'm going to need some sunshine after this one. So Chris, tell us about the Anti-Fascist Book Club. I love your T-shirt. Let me know where I can get one. Defend your local library. Tell us about that. What you're reading and how folks can get involved.
Thank you. So the Anti-Fascist Book Club is the big project of Veterans Fighting Fascism, which you can find at veteransfightingfascism.org. A lot of folks were coming to me after the election to ask, what books should I be reading? You've studied extremism for years. You've infiltrated these extremist organizations. What can I read to get to the bottom of what's going to happen? So I did a TikTok video kind of off the hip, and it got 1 million views. People started setting up their own book clubs, reading things like On Tyranny, Strong Men, How to Be an Anti-Racist. So I decided to just write a book club guide to help people get started. So it's free, veteransfightingfascism.org. You can download the guide. It has got all of everything that you need for the first 6 meetings. So all you need is a physical location, preferably. You can do it virtually if that doesn't work for you, and a time and place to meet. I've got everything else, the recommended reading list, how to go through those first few books, and if people want to get the new merch that we just got printed this week, whether they are a veteran or a civilian, go to veteransfightingfascism.org. Hit the little button at the top, go to our store. Everything is made by Fee Marketing. It's a union shop, print to order. Usually within the week, you'll get your stuff. And I just ordered 12 items and have a huge pile
Well,
right
good.
next to me.
Well, yeah. So please go out and do that. Go to jointheunion.us. Also, we're going to have our monthly book club. This month features Sarah Stein Lubrano, who I interviewed a couple of months ago about her book, Don't Talk About Politics, another great read. But also, guys, as we're here just within a few weeks of Election Day, if you live in Virginia or New Jersey or Pennsylvania or California, your races are getting a lot of attention. If you have not voted in those places that you can, please get out and do that today. If you want to help virtually, go to jointheunion.us, go to our action center. We have mobilized links for literally stuff in every state. But do not miss that opportunity. And a lot of places where you all live too, you're going to have local or municipal races. Make sure you don't miss those. Remember, the people that you elect closest to you have the biggest effect on your life, your kids' life, that of your family and your community. So please do get out there and get involved. All right. Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, brother.
And everybody else, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.